In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231, adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Board of Adjustment of the Township of Franklin has been provided. Board members, applicant, professionals, members of the public, please speak directly into microphones so our recording secretary can properly process minutes. Applicants and professionals, please fill out the sheet on the table when you've completed your testimony. Thank you, and let's call the roll, please.
Cheryl Bethia. Joel Reese.
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal.
Here.
Robert Shepard. Vasim Verdas.
Here.
Alan Rich.
Here.
Rich Prakanik. Kanal Lakia. Faraz Khan.
Here.
Michael Dougherty.
Here.
Chairman Thomas.
Here. Minutes, regular meeting, July 11th, 2024. We have a motion.
I move to accept. I'll second.
This is for July 11th. So, Cheryl Bethia, Joel Reese, Gary Rosenthal, Vasim Verdas, and Chairman Thomas can vote. So we have, I'm sorry, so who did the motion?
I did.
And who seconded? Okay, so those eligible to vote, I guess all in favor?
Yes. Yes.
Any opposed?
Okay. There's no resolutions. There are no resolutions. We have nothing for discussion. Hearings, Charles D. Filippo, ZBA 24-00012, C variance in which the applicant seeks to construct an attached two-car garage at 28 Gates Road, Somerset, Block 368.08, Lot 66.01 in the R40 zone, is going to be carried to October 10th, 2024. A notification to the newspaper is needed, so anybody here for that will not be heard. The first application we'll hear is Gregory Booth, ZBA 24-00013, the C variance in which the applicant seeks to replace the existing garage with a larger garage at 33 Washington Avenue, Somerset, Block 17, Lot 12 in the R40 zone. And I know Mr. Booth is here. Okay.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I can give just a brief factual background. So this property is at 33 Washington Avenue. It's in the R40 single-family zone. It's currently occupied by a dwelling as well as an existing garage. I'll show the location. It's basically in the Griggstown area of the town. The location there is shown on Washington Avenue, outlined in blue. This is basically an aerial of the property. You can't really see the garage here because it's on top of it in red is the approximate dimensions and location of the proposed garage. The site plan shows it a little bit better. So you can see in this plan here, there's an existing garage. It is located within the required side yard. This is a very older portion of the town developed before zoning even came into place. The applicant's proposing a larger garage in the same location, one-story garage, 13 feet and change in height, 24 by 24 feet in dimension. It's, again, located basically in the same location. It requires a side yard variance because it basically be a larger structure in the required side yard setback. So you can see outlined in the black here, that's the existing garage, and then in red, basically extending back into the side is the proposed garage, and the applicant provided some architectural renderings and floor plans of the two-car garage that's proposed. So that's the background.
The side yard variance isn't being affected in terms of a distance, right?
The current setback is 5.7 feet, and they're honoring that 5.7 feet and going back.
And
But again, since there's more structure in that required setback, that's what's generating the need for the variance.
So it's kind of an extension of a variance, extending a variance toward the rear of the property. Well, let's swear you in, and then,
Mr. Booth, raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give before this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Can you just restate your name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Gregory Booth, and I live at 33 Washington Avenue.
Thank you.
is what Mr. Healy described basically what you agree with?
Yes, sir.
And is there any way that you can think of, it doesn't look like it on the screen over there, that you can alter any of the shape or construction to eliminate the variance?
Not without putting it basically right in the middle of the backyard, which I think qualifies as a kind of undue hardship.
Is that mic on?
Is the mic on?
Does sound much.
Press the mute button, that's also a power.
Is that better? No flashing. Is that better?
I don't know, it sounds the same.
Check. It's a low battery. Is that better?
There
There
we
we go.
That's better.
Sorry. There's not an obvious way to alter the plans that we seek without essentially putting the garage in the middle of our backyard, which would be far away from our driveway and cause other hardships.
Okay, is there anybody who wants or needs any more information?
What do you store in the garage, Gregory?
Cars,
Just cars?
yeah, and lawn equipment, you know.
No flannels, though?
No, no, no.
You gonna have electricity,
Yes,
plumbing?
no.
I'm fine.
No further questions, and we'll open to the public if anyone would like to make a comment or ask a question. There's nobody I see, so we'll close to the public. And I'll entertain a motion for a resolution here.
I'll move to accept ZBA 24-00013, in which the applicant seeks to replace the existing garage with a larger garage at 33 Washington Avenue in Block 17, Lot 12.
Second.
I second.
She seconds.
Good,
We're all
second
set.
here.
We just don't have Christine calling the roll here.
Yep, so we'll have, okay, so I'll go down the vote. Joel Reese,
Yes? Yes.
Gary Rosenthal,
Yes.
Wasim Verdas,
Yes.
Alan Rich,
Yes.
Faraz Khan. Yes. Michael Dougherty,
Yes.
and Chairman Thomas.
Yes, good luck with it, and
Thank you all.
you're fortunate not to have to wait until after the next one. On the agenda next would be Somerset Property, ZBA 23-00016, D1 variance preliminary final site plan with variance, C variances, minor subdivision in which the applicant proposes to subdivide the property into 2 lots and construct a 54,329 square foot warehouse, including 9 loading stalls at 415 Weston Canal Road and 91 Cottontail Lane, Somerset, Block 517.02, Lot 8.13 in the B1 zone. And you can start when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. I note there's a witness list, which is not our witnesses. Do I need to
I
get
don't
anyone
think
so
we're
they can
on yet.
sign? You can't hear? Any better?
I think you got it there.
Okay. In any event, my name is Lane Miller. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Somerset Properties Realty, LP. And this is at least our second time in front of the board. We were here, sorry about that. We were here a number of years ago, at which time the board granted an approval for the current building on the property. At the time, the property was a 15-acre, slightly more, property that we ended up having to combine with an adjoining, actually, there were two properties. One was 10 acres, one was 5. We had to combine them to satisfy a requirement of the Delaware Raritan Canal Commission and the DEP concerning a conservation easement. The reason that was done at that time is the applicant was not able to locate an off-site property for the mitigation bank, had to do it on the same property they were developing, and as a result, there was a requirement to combine the two lots due to the conservation easement. We are, in essence, today seeking to undo that combination and that conservation easement. You'll hear testimony from our engineer as to why that's required, but we've approached the DRCC and the DEP about the idea. We have now an off-site mitigation property, and the indication is they would be willing to do that. We're in front of the board to achieve that. We're also in front of the board because since the original application, there has been a change in the ordinance, as you're aware, where warehouse use is no longer permitted in this zone. We're seeking a use variance to permit that. So with that being said, I'm going to start with our engineer, who's going to describe the nature of the application, the project, unless you have some questions of me about that background.
Anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Our engineer is Jackie Giordano of Dynamic. Ms. Giordano.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me all?
Yes.
Hi, I'm
Just swear you in real quick. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give before this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you just repeat your name and spell your last name for the record, please?
Jackie Giordano, Giordano.
Thank you.
We accept her.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry, thank you.
That's no
Please.
problem.
Thank you. Sure. So to start, I'd like to introduce you to more to the site and the existing conditions of the site. So I wanted to bring up my first exhibit. It is the aerial map exhibit. Do I need to mark this?
If we can mark this as A1,
A1.
please.
So this is the aerial map exhibit. It's dated July 11th, 2024, prepared by our office. And for orientation purposes, north is to the right of the page with Cottontail Lane located towards the bottom of the page, running north to south. And this is an aerial map of our property and the surrounding uses, with our property specifically identified and the surrounding zoning uses. So specifically, our project is located at 91 Cottontail Lane. It is block 51701, lot 8.13, and consists of 15.612 acres. It's located in the business and industry zone, where, as was noted, warehousing is not a permitted use. Looking first at the surrounding area to the site to the north, we have Weston Canal Road, with the Delaware and Raritan Canal and Raritan River beyond that. To the east is Cottontail Lane with other industrial and warehousing uses. And then again to the south and west, we have other industrial warehousing uses, all these uses being located within business and industry zone. Specifically on the site, as was mentioned, on the west side of the site, as you can see up here, is the recently constructed warehouse building approved and built in 2019. On the site, the property is essentially bisected and traversed by the Randolph Brook. You can see here in this darker line, the Randolph Brook traverses the site, ultimately discharging to the Raritan River, in which case the remainder of the property is is presently wooded, and that comprised of about 5 acres on the east side of the brook. On the
Mr.
east,
Danon, can I just interrupt real quick? Can you adjust, we do have at least one member of the public. And sir, are you a member of the public or are you with this group? Okay, just wanted to make sure. So,
would you like me to rotate it still?
yeah, why don't you rotate it just a little bit, maybe move it back. Just in the future, and we did put this in our materials that we gave you, we've been asking applicants for years now to bring laptops, because we have these 4
I
pages.
do have a
It's
US
much easier for the public and the board to see it than on that small board
Sure.
30 feet away.
I do have a USB if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think at this point you can move on. I don't think we really have one member of the public here, but
Okay.
just,
Yeah.
again, since if you come back before the board, just please remember that. If we had a big crowd here, it'd be a problem.
Certainly.
I do in fact have a laptop, and we could do it with USB if the board prefers.
I guess I would
as
just
we
defer to the board, considering that we don't seem to have a large crowd. If you can see this, or if you need something larger so you can see it on the screen.
Maybe we could ask a member of the
I'll
public.
defer to what the board thinks. I don't have a
Well, the board
problem.
needs to see it too.
Yeah,
I
clearly.
defer to the board if they can see that board.
Everybody okay with it? Yeah. Yes?
Thank you.
Okay, can you go on with it?
Sure. So, in addition to the woods that exist on site, there is an existing township storm sewer line that runs along our northern property all the way back to an existing head wall that discharges to the Randolph Brook today. The project for site plan review will be limited to this area on the eastern portion of the site. Looking at the topography today on the eastern portion of the site, we're sloping down from Cottondale Lane over towards the Randolph Brook. Randolph Brook is considered a regulated water with a 50-foot riparian buffer and associated flood hazard area that has been verified with the NJDEP with a flood hazard area verification permit. The stream also has an associated township stream corridor buffer and a DRC stream corridor buffer that has been identified with this application. On the property, along the stream, as well as within a low-lying area on site, there are freshwater wetlands that have also been verified with the DEP with a freshwater wetlands letter of interpretation permit. And additionally, as part of the development of the warehouse, as was mentioned previously, there was a conservation easement placed on a portion of the site for the DRCC, which is in the process of being vacated and relocated as a part of this project application. We are preserving the corridor and supplementing the property in the DRCC review zone, as was mentioned, with mitigation offsite. So moving into the proposed development and the application, this will be Exhibit A2. It is the overall site plan rendering, also with the date of July 11th, 2024, and prepared by our office. It is a colorized version of the overall site plan sheet that was submitted with this application, with our landscaping components superimposed on top, and with the aerial background. So as it was mentioned, we're seeking preliminary and final major site plan and use variance approval for a proposed warehouse building. We are also proposing a minor subdivision application. As far as the subdivision goes, we're proposing, in coordination with the township, lot 8.14, which is the previously approved and constructed site consisting of the warehouse development on the western portion of the site. That consists of 10.11 acres, and then proposed 8.15 is the presently vacant site where the proposed improvements are shown. That property is 5.001 acres, and it's important to note that the proposed subdivision lot areas will conform with all bulk standards, including lot size, building setbacks, and coverage requirements.
Mr. Tano, those new lots we're proposing, they basically reinstitute the prior lots before the property was unified in a consolidation deed, correct?
That's correct. And just to get a little bit closer, This would be Exhibit A3. It is called the site plan rendering, and it is a colorized version of the site plan sheet submitted with this application with our landscaping superimposed on top. Orientation remains the same. We're just zoomed in a little bit here. So in regards to our project, we do have our architect here to walk you through the building a little bit more, but we are proposing an approximately 51,000 square foot building with a height of 49 feet, which complies with the maximum permitted height of 50 feet, consists of 9 loading stalls and 2 drive-in ramps proposed. To walk you through the site layout a little bit further, it's worth noting that the initial proposal consisted of approximately 61,000 square feet. And after meeting with Township professionals, we've revised the layout, reducing the footprint in order to preserve more wooded areas, provide full site circulation, and align the circulation with a signalized intersection that's located along our property frontage here with Campus Drive. As such, the site design was designed with consideration of the Township Franklin zoning code in mind, meeting the standards for lot coverage, impervious coverage, building setbacks, building height, and parking standards. The building was specifically situated as close to Cottontail Lane as allowed by setbacks to ensure that we would have minimal disturbance to the environmentally sensitive areas associated with the Randolph Brook. Access to the site will be provided to the development with 2 full movement driveways from Cottontail Lane. The northernmost driveway shall serve as the 4th leg of the Cottontail Lane and Campus Drive intersection, as I noted, designed to accommodate both passenger vehicles and tractor trailers. The southernmost driveway shall be limited to passenger vehicles only, as designated by signage, on both ends of the drive aisle, as well as the design of the truck court in the rear and the size of the curb radius at the entrance of Cottontail Lane. The circulation through the site otherwise will be provided by 2-way drive aisles within the parking areas. Per ordinance, the proposed development complies with the parking standards. For warehouses, the number of parking spaces must be 1 per 1,000 square feet for the first 5,000 square feet and 1 per 2,500 square feet for space thereafter. Therefore, 23 parking spaces are calculated to be required, and we are proposing 24 parking spaces. The parking stalls also comply with the dimensional criteria of the ordinance. 17 of those parking spaces are located along the northern side of the building here, with the 7 remaining spaces in the rear of the site adjacent to another building entrance. Additionally, we are proposing 2 make-ready electrical vehicle charging spaces with this project and a total of 3 ADA accessible spaces. Additionally, pedestrian sidewalks and ADA accessible routes are provided throughout the site and around the building, providing access to parking areas in accordance with ADA regulations. We've also incorporated a bike rack into our project near the entrance per comments from the board engineer. In regards to the loading and trash pickup, it's located at the rear of the proposed building, screened from view of Cottontail Lane. It consists of 9 loading stalls adjacent to the building with 2 drive-in ramps. We are seeking a variance for the overall length of the loading area. The ordinance requires 2 times the overall length of the largest vehicle anticipated, which would be 147 feet here, whereas 130 feet is proposed. It's important to note that 130-foot width of a truck court is an industry standard warehouse for warehouse loading to allow for adequate maneuverability and circulation within the loading area. Vehicular circulation plans were submitted as a part of the site plan application, and as noted in the engineer's report, he takes no exception to the granting of this variance. We do also have a 10 by 20-foot trash and recycling enclosure located at the rear of the site adjacent to one of the drive-in ramps. That is a sufficient width for 2 containers, 1 trash and 1 recycling. The containers will also be screened with a board-on-board fence to provide screening from view of the neighbors and certainly from Cottontail Lane. To touch a little bit about the grading design of the project, we've designed it in accordance with ADA regulations, and additionally we designed it to maintain drainage patterns as much as possible. We've designed the site with the recessed loading docks at the back of the site to take advantage of the existing drainage condition or grading conditions on site. However, as it is not a presently developed site, to accommodate appropriate slopes needed for parking, circulation, and site access, retaining walls are required along portions of the development, along the sides of the property, as well as the back of the development, in order to minimize disturbance to the environmentally sensitive areas. As mentioned in the board engineer's report, these walls, as required by building code, will have appropriate guide rails and safety railings as necessary. We also have a wall proposed in the front of the building in order to maintain appropriate access to all the building entrances. In regards to our drainage design, this project is considered a major development, and so is designed to comply with the stormwater runoff quantity, quality, and recharge standards set forth by the state stormwater code, as well as the Franklin Township Stormwater Ordinance, using green infrastructure techniques. The stormwater system consists generally of pervious pavement systems for the majority of the motor vehicle surface, and that will discharge to an underground stormwater system, ultimately making its way to the Randolph Brook. The stormwater runoff from the roof is also directed to this underground system. The project proposes to remove that existing storm pipe on site and relocate it and resize it with adequate capacity to service the existing flow to the pipe, as well as from this project. In coordination with the board engineer, an additional maintenance access ramp at the back of the truck court has also been incorporated into the design so that the downstream connection locations would also have vehicular access as necessary. Stormwater design of this project approval is required by the township, the county, the DRCC, the SCD, and the DEP. It's worth noting that the stormwater design has already been reviewed and approved by the DEP, and the project has received the necessary development permits from the DEP for freshwater wetlands and flood hazard area disturbances I mentioned. We have also reviewed the stormwater comments outlined in the engineer's review letter and take no exception to addressing and complying with his comments. Briefly touching on the utilities, we have water, sanitary sewer, gas, and electric services available for connection along the Cottontail Lane right-of-way. Water service being provided by the Franklin Township Water Department, sanitary sewer from the Franklin Township Sewerage Authority, and electric and gas service from PSE&G. Going into our landscaping and buffering design, existing vegetation will be removed for the proposed improvements, and supplemental plantings and screenings are proposed consistent with the landscape aesthetic along the industrial corridor of Cottontail Lane. For comments received by the board professionals, we did do an additional site inventory performed by the project surveyor, and as such, in accordance with the tree replacement requirements for the site, 148 trees greater than 4 inches are being removed, which calculates to 217 replacement trees being required, and 86 trees are being proposed with this application. Accordingly, the applicant intends to address the 131 tree deficit via payment to the Township Tree Fund as permitted by the Township Ordinance. An updated tree replacement plan will be provided to the Township as requested by the board professionals. As far as the landscape design goes, it includes enhancing the aesthetic along the front of the building, along Cottontail Lane, around the building entrances, and within the parking islands. The rear of the site is to remain a wooded buffer as part of the stream corridor buffer requirements. As noted previously, per comments received by the board professionals, the site plan has been revised to preserve the township 150-foot stream corridor, with the exception of the disturbance for the upgrades needed to the existing stormwater discharge, which is a previously disturbed area. In total, we have 86 trees, 234 shrubs proposed, all native species to the area as required by the DRCC. The site lighting design in the parking areas will be illuminated throughout the site with wall-mounted LED fixtures in compliance with the township lighting standards. No variances or waivers are being requested for the on-site lighting. And lastly, in regards to signs, we do have one monument sign proposed to comply with the ordinance requirements located out by the Cottontail Lane frontage. At this time, we don't have details confirmed, but we will comply with the township sign ordinance. Facade and directional signage will need to be determined further with the building designs, but is intended to comply with the township sign ordinance as well. So in summary, the project is designed in conformance with the bulk criteria within the business and industry zone, and through coordination with the township professionals. We have received and reviewed comments by the board engineer, the board planner, police, fire official, health department, and utility companies, and take no exception to addressing their comments. So at this point, if there's any other questions as far as the site design, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
You take no exception to, abiding by what they say then, right? So you will do that then? Is that?
We will comply with the recommendations.
Pardon?
Is that correct? You'll comply with the recommendations and requirements and,
You will comply.
Correct,
Yes.
with all the board professional letters.
All right. This property is not considered a T property, is it? We had trouble with a T property at one time with one of our other applications, and that came up and was an issue. I can't remember where and when, but
I'm not familiar with that term. A T property?
yeah,
Like the letter T?
yes.
yeah, this is not a flag lot or the like.
Is that
Mi-
Flag
Ms.
lot, maybe that's what it was.
Ms. Giordano, this is essentially there was a consolidation of two separate lots in the prior application before the planning board. We are now seeking to separate again to the old existing lot lines, correct?
That's correct.
One lot is on Cottontail Lane, and the other will be on, and of course now I'm losing.
Weston Canal Road.
Weston Canal Road, thank you. So they will have separate entrances directly onto each of the properties from a separate roadway, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Does that address the concern, Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then just to be clear, you're saying that you're going to comply with all the comments in the reports?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question, just to clarify. I'm over here. So just to clarify, with regard to the stream preservation ordinance, which is a township ordinance, basically you have to prove that the disturbance is necessary, that you can't avoid it, and you have to demonstrate that it's the minimum necessary to achieve, what you need to do. So my understanding, it's related to a stormwater outfall and the piping associated with it. So can you just describe to the board why, and on the plan, I can kind of see, it looks like you're showing kind of the tree removal going along with that pipe to the outfall near the stream. Is that correct?
That's correct. And to reiterate what I was saying before, the location of this head wall and this stormwater discharge we are proposing is in the exact location of where it is today, and we are reconstructing it and improving the condition as a result of this project.
Okay, but is there, I mean, at least from here, it looks like there's an extension of that disturbance going down towards the stream. Is that what I'm seeing from here?
That's the existing stream. So the disturbance will stop here.
Okay, and then the rest of that is the existing stream?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions?
I have a few questions. So you did mention about the wetlands and streams permits, and I would assume that stormwater permits were also receive flood hazard. Could you specify which permits and when did you receive these letters from the DEP?
Certainly. So for the DEP, we have, in regards to wetlands, we have a freshwater wetlands LOI, which will verify the limitations of the wetlands and buffers that are on site. And then we received a general permit to fill an isolated wetland located here. And then a permit for disturbance with our stormwater outfall up here, another general permit. Those were, I think the wetlands permits were received in January of this year. As far as flood hazard goes, we received a flood hazard area individual permit. In September of 2023, And I do want to correct, that was for the initial application that I spoke about at 61,000 square feet. So they've reviewed the stormwater in that regard. Additional applications for the modification of the permit will be required based off of reducing the footprint and essentially changing the layout that was stamped approved.
So you will be going back to DEP for minor modification?
Correct. I think it's still a major because minor, I believe, is like a typo
Okay.
consideration, but we'll need an additional DEP permit.
And you had mentioned about the regulated areas, the wetlands, and how DEP sees it, the streams and buffer areas, the transition areas. Is that, and then the area that you're conserving, is that in addition to those regulated area by the state, or is that, the same thing for the town? So
Okay.
you're conserving some areas, right, mitigation that you had mentioned about. Are these two different areas, or are they the same areas?
I would say they're all associated with the Randolph Brook tributary, but they are different dimensional criteria and they're governed by different agencies. So the conservation restriction that's requiring the mitigation is imposed by the Delaware Raritan Canal Commission.
I see. And the local township, is that also part of it too?
The local township has an ordinance that prohibits the disturbance within certain distances of the Randolph Brook. There's no conservation restriction with the town.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, if that finishes questions of this witness, we can proceed with the next witness.
Looks like
we
that's good.
I'm sorry, can I also ask, right here?
Certainly.
Just one last one. Could you please just show me the limit of disturbance? Maybe what, like, if you could just point it out,
Sure.
Where would be the vegetation removed, like that limit?
So this dark green area, that's existing woods to remain. This light green area is disturbed and being revegetated. So where you see that wood line go is what's necessary to be disturbed with the project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. We have architectural testimony. We also have the planner to testify with regard to the use variance. Typically, I'd be putting the architect up first. The plans are in front of the board. I didn't know if the board preferred to hear from the planner as the use variance first.
Typically, we hear a planner last.
Okay.
So, Architecture.
Because that's one of the big issues, I was throwing it out there for the board. In that case, I will ask our architect to come on.
Is there going to be traffic testimony?
Jackie. Traffic is from, yes,
Okay.
and we'll put that up after the architect. Did you prefer the architect before the traffic, or the traffic before the architect, or you don't care?
It's fine.
Okay, perfect. I was just killing time while we got his exhibits.
Thank you.
Okay. Our traffic expert is Brendan Ledbetter. Yeah, well, do you want to swear him in?
Yeah. Why don't we swear you in? Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give before this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you just repeat your name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, it's Brendan Ledbetter. Ledbetter is L-E-A-D-B-E-A-T-E-R.
Thank you.
And Mr. Leibnitter, you are a licensed architect?
That's correct.
Can you tell the board a little bit about your licensure, training, and experience?
Sure. So I've been licensed in the state of New Jersey as an architect. My license is current. I have a bachelor's degree of architecture from NJIT. I've been practicing architecture for the past 15 years. In the past 5 years, I've primarily been focused on buildings of this sort. So I've attended many meetings throughout New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut regarding warehouse facilities, and I have actually been in front of this board previously.
And has your testimony been accepted as that of an expert?
Yes.
Okay, we're
I
fine.
would submit. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Ledbetter, can you
Sure.
explain the nature of the project and your diagrams?
So I'll just be brief in referencing this floor plan / combination roof plan just for conservation of materials.
Maybe we can mark this as an exhibit too. This
Yes,
would be
I'm sorry.
A4.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So looking at the plan, as previously stated, one-story warehouse, roughly 51,000 square feet of building with a 40-foot clear height. It's really not going to exceed at this point 49 feet. As we're showing in the elevations, it's 47.2. Basically, the building is going to present primarily as the front of the building to the northeast of the facade, but we've sort of treated the entire elevation and building as if it would be, face fronting along any roadway. Obviously, towards the back portion, which is the west of the building, we will have our 9 dock doors in combination with 2 drive-in doors, providing access into those buildings via forklift or van. We are potentially proposing a future tenant, and as you show here to the northeast, we're primarily focused on that area. But again, we are treating various corners of this building as if they are face fronting. Additionally, I'd shown rooftop units on these plans for mechanical purposes, to properly semi-heat this space, just showing that they generally and primarily are located centrally on that rooftop to avoid any visual disturbances either from the sidewalk or for patrons driving by. That's just generally dealt with by viewing angles.
Excuse me, Mr. Hack. Do you want each page separately marked as an exhibit?
No, I think we can just mark it as one exhibit.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Regarding elevations, colors aren't great representation here as to what they are, but they will be muted earth tones, just sort of to not really cause attention to the specific facade or building within this specific location. As you can see here in the top left, called out as north elevation, you can see that main entry with the depressed area ramping up into that glass storefront filled facade. We just sort of tried to also break down the overall scale of this building just through a series of vertical and horizontal grids and also color patterns. Looking down to the bottom left, which is the west elevation, you can also see these drive-in dock doors and the dock doors that are also being provided for the tractor trailers. And again, as you can see, referring to the east elevation and the south elevation, again, we're providing lots of glass storefront, just generally to provide a better atmosphere for both the patrons or having to move around this building, but also for the individuals inhabiting these buildings. So basically, we're just trying to drive some light deeper into that space and make it more of a nicer environment for the employees. And that's essentially it regarding these drawings. If you'd like, I could refer to the renderings that we also provided. As you can see here, I don't know if we want to mark them out as other exhibits or...
Maybe these we should mark separately as exhibits.
Sure.
And just do them seriatim.
What's that?
Just do them seriatim in order.
Yeah, sure. So this will do as A5. So A5 is generally just showing that angled portion of the building, which we are kind of treating as that main entry and presentation of the building. And really, obviously, I think showing that as where people would access that space generally. Particularly, again, you can see the storefront glass windows, highlighted also by the sort of muted color tones, vertical and horizontal accents, just trying to reduce the overall scale of that building.
Excuse me, is that a view from within the site? Is that correct?
It's as you're accessing the site, right as you turn into the facility.
Okay, so
So
those stop bars are basically.
Yeah, you're almost standing or sitting over here in your vehicle, looking essentially south. This exhibit I'll label A6. As you can see in this one, it's also another image looking towards that angled portion of the building, just presenting with the vegetation and the storefronts, just giving a more aesthetically pleasing, I believe, feel to the building. This A7 is looking towards the dock positionings and really just showing how the planted vegetation will help to, at least semi-hide some of that activity and, I think provide at least some barrier to that specific area. And again, these are all, because we did treat all of these portions of the elevations as if they were fronting a roadway. Again, a similar look and feel at the corners of this portion of the building with the storefronts high up, and just really, treating that again as a main entry, and that's kind of it.
And just to be clear, we'll call that A8, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions to the board?
Anything?
I see sidewalks there. Can you tell me about sidewalks?
I believe that's probably more likely a question that should probably be answered by civil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can call Ms. Giordano back up. She'll testify as to the sidewalks.
Okay. And I also see cars, but I don't see places for bicycles and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, these aren't, photorealistic.
Okay.
There will be, as previously stated, positions for bike racks.
Okay. And charging stations?
I believe they will be provided, yes.
Perfect.
In essence, these renderings were designed to show the exterior of the building, not necessarily all the.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't work for Pixar, so I can't.
The site plan speaks for itself as far as landscaping and things like that.
Correct.
Correct.
Ms. Giordano, can I just call you up for a moment to address the questions to the board regarding the bike racks and the sidewalk? Thank you. And I assume she doesn't have to be resworn. Now, there had been a question from the board as to the sidewalks for the property. Are there sidewalks shown on the site plan?
There's sidewalks around the building only. There's no sidewalk along the frontage. Is that what you're referring to?
Well-
Which exhibit?
I think the question from the board member, just to guess, was about sidewalks generally and whether they're
Yes.
actually provided.
Yes, so we have ADA compliant sidewalks along the parking areas and along all building facades to make sure that we have appropriate access points.
Okay. And are there in fact bike racks?
And there's a
at the-
bike rack proposed near the building entrance.
Thank you. Any other questions to the board from Ms. Giordano regarding those issues or any others?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions. This is for the architect. Is there a user identified for the warehouse?
No, not at this time.
Okay. So the board, both the planning board and zoning board are becoming a little bit more familiar with the different types of warehouses. Is this, can you describe this as any, I mean, there's fulfillment centers, distribution centers, different types of warehouses. Can you characterize this? Is it being designed in a certain way for a certain type of warehouse, for a certain type of warehouse tenant?
I think that would probably be up to ownership to potentially answer with regard to the functioning of that, but being that we have 9 dock doors and 2 drive-in doors, I do believe it's going to be, you know, a fairly, you know, fairly minor activity in terms of how it's functioning. But again, I think that's more for the ownership to respond to.
I think you'll also hear a little bit of that from traffic, Mr. Healy.
Okay.
Given the size of the building, so for example, you mentioned a fulfillment center. They're typically much, much larger buildings, so that is an unlikely use.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I assume the traffic engineer would address that as well, but you know, I believe you had mentioned that you had designed previous, you know, other applications for
Sure,
warehouses. So
sure.
have you been asked to design for another client a fulfillment center or some other type of, like, for example, could this accommodate, even though it only has 9 loading docks for the larger vehicles, could this accommodate a warehouse user where it has a whole bunch of box trucks going out all day long?
I mean,
Or would it be designed in a different way that this site and building couldn't accommodate?
Yeah, I mean, typically, a building of this size would be for more long-term storage, I believe. Usually, a fulfillment center would be, you know, 200 to 1 million square feet in size. So typically, again, I'm not entirely sure who the tenant would be, nor am I entirely sure of the, you know, the intentions. Generally, you know, again, a facility of this size would have lower activity levels.
All right, well, thank you for that, and I guess maybe we'll ask similar questions of the traffic engineer, so I appreciate that.
I have a question. Is the roof solar ready?
Typically, yeah, we would account for 5 to 7 pounds per square foot to allow for solar to be installed later on.
And are there plans for electric charging stations for cars?
Yeah, yes, there is.
How many electric charging stations?
I think that's back to Ms. Giordano.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Giordano, if you can.
Could you please repeat the question?
Okay, EV charging stations.
Yeah, so we have 1 tower proposed servicing 2 electrical vehicle charging spots.
Okay. Is that within our allocation?
I'd have to look, but I think I heard the testimony was that there were 23 parking spaces, so
Yeah,
that's
so we're
basically
below.
about 10%, so
Okay.
I'll check, but I, on the face of it, I think that's what it would require.
Okay.
And also, Mr. Healy, as to the nature of the use, while a tenant has not yet been selected or proposed because the building's not up, I spoke to my client. They anticipate having a use similar to the one that's in the existing larger building, which is a family-owned operation doing its own production and distribution.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I will bring up our traffic engineer, Andy Jaffola from Dynamic.
Hello, good evening.
Sir, if you can raise your right hand, we'll swear you in. Do you swear that testimony you're about to give before this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you just repeat your name and spell your last name for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Andrew Jaffola. Last name is J-A-F as in Frank, O-L-L-A.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have to talk it.
Oh.
Yeah, they want you to use the handheld, I think, maybe.
You
It's
just
a
have to,
handle.
you just have to really speak right into it. The mics are very sensitive that way. There you go.
You got it.
Okay, perfect. So, Mr. Jaffola, you're a licensed traffic engineer?
Yes, I'm a registered professional engineer in New Jersey. I'm a senior principal with Dynamic Traffic. I've been a practicing traffic engineer since graduating from Rutgers University in 2007. I've testified in front of numerous boards throughout New Jersey, this board included. This is what I do.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Jaffola, you had an opportunity to review this application and do some traffic studies?
I did, yes, and excuse me while I make sure my paper doesn't slide off here. Yes, we prepared a traffic impact study for this project. It is dated March 15th, 2024. It was submitted to this board and reviewed by the board professionals. And there I didn't note any comments at all on the traffic study, but it was listed as something that was reviewed. So I'll just kind of step you through what we did as part of that traffic study and then kind of relate that to this application. We evaluated this project. It's really a multi-step process. The first step is by looking at the land use and kind of what we expect the traffic to be related to this project. And there was a question about, is this a distribution? Is this being designed by to be something other than maybe a warehouse? And what I can tell you from my experience is that a distribution center would require a whole lot more parking because you would have a whole lot more employees. The loading docks would be designed differently. They'll be a little bit lower if you have Sprinter vans and delivery vehicles that are coming up. In short, this is very consistent with what I've seen on other projects. There's very kind of run-of-the-mill warehouse type of use, and that this project really fits that mold. To the size of it, again, the distribution would be much larger because they want to. They really want to accomplish a lot within one building when they bring all those employees to one spot. So this really does not fit the mold for those higher types warehouse uses or distribution or fulfillment centers.
And for example, it's not cross-docked or anything like that?
Correct, yes. So as part of our traffic study, we projected the trips for this warehouse project. We did that consistent with the Institute of Transportation Engineers methodology as well as NJDOT. And we run the square footage of this project through that. We're looking at about 30 trips in the AM or the afternoon rush hour. That's about one trip every 2 minutes. To put that into perspective, if this was on a DOT state highway, we would stop here. We would say the trips are 30. It is less than the DOT significant trip threshold of 100, and we would document that and we would move on. For this project, we did take it a step further. We took counts at the adjacent intersection at Cottontail and Campus. We looked at the pre-development analysis. We looked at the post-development analysis. And what we also did was contact the Franklin Planning Board to identify any other approved projects that are in the area or projects that are under construction. And we made sure to include those in the background traffic as well. The other thing to note here is this project is proposed at the intersection at Cottontail and Campus. The primary driveway is going to end up functioning as the fourth leg to that existing traffic signal. Currently, that traffic signal is a three-phase intersection with 3 legs, so we would be installing the fourth leg to that traffic signal. As part of that, the traffic signal will need to be modified due to the physical impacts of the traffic. We would not be changing the phasing of the intersection, but we would be upgrading certain components of the traffic signal, not only to accommodate this site, but to really bring it into compliance for the vehicle indications to the latest MUTCD. And what I mean by that is for Cottontail Avenue, you have a left turn lane from Cottontail to Campus, but there's no left turn arrow. So you're going to have a left turn arrow when you do this modification because that is what meets the latest standard. And when we touch this signal, we have to do that. So that's an improvement that really does not relate to this fourth leg of the intersection, but it is going to end up being a public benefit by installing that improvement. A couple other things, there's a couple traffic signal heads out there that don't have visors. Not sure how they went missing, but they will, they'll get new traffic signal heads. So over and all, you're going to accommodate the fourth legs of the intersection and more or less spruce up the signal to meet the latest standard in terms of vehicle indications. When we run all of this through, when we do the pre-development traffic analysis and post-development traffic analysis, this project does not move the needle at all in terms of level of service. The level of service today for the overall intersection is level service B, post-development level service B. Again, and this makes sense. This is consistent with what you would expect when you have such a low traffic generator at 30 trips versus what I mentioned earlier, which would be the 100 trip threshold for DOT to even start looking at analysis. That really, summarizes what I have to say here. We've heard testimony about parking, EV stalls, and circulation. I really have nothing to add to that. I agree with all the testimony that's been previously provided. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
How far out did you extend your research in terms of other projects and how you fit in with them? Because they're Cottontail Lane and that intersection, and as it goes to Canal Road, is a pretty major throughway for that business industry section. And there have been any number of approvals in the last 12 months there. So, did you do a study about what you're adding to it how it will mesh with a tremendous amount of development that's in that area?
So, I mean, we did this traffic study in March of this year. So the traffic study is current as of that time frame. The way we actually contact the planning board to find out what projects are approved and what are under construction. And they came back to us with 4 projects that we included at 200 Cottontail Lane, 401 Cottontail Lane, 110 to 130 Belmont Drive, and 1 Wiley Drive. These projects range in size from to a 240,000 square foot warehouse, 100,000 square foot warehouse, another 160,000 square foot office building. So these are significant projects, I think, which you're alluding to, that are included in the traffic. So when we analyze the pre-development condition, those projects are considered pre-development. So they form the baseline of our analysis. Now, yes, does that answer your question?
Well, I understand they gave you the ones that are, let's say, your immediate neighbors. But almost, I can't put a number on it, a tremendous amount of traffic from that whole area uses Cottontail Lane and the intersection at Weston Road as their access to 287. And it goes well beyond your immediate vicinity. Amazon, for instance, is not included in that, but you're going to be meshing with Amazon traffic on Canal Road.
Right, the Amazon facility
Is
I
on
believe on
Randolph,
Randolph, right,
right.
the Randolph one. Yeah,
That's just one. There's any number of other ones that are contributing traffic to that portion of Cottontail, that intersection, and the intersection on Canal Road. So I'm wondering if any of that was figured into it.
Well, we contacted the Franklin Township Planning Board, and we included those projects that were provided to us. There's always ongoing development that's happening in the area, and that's one prong of it. We did look at it by contacting the planning board and obtaining those studies and making sure they're included. The other part of it is we're evaluating this project and the incremental impact of this specific project. Normally, the scope and the breadth of your traffic study is going to be commensurate with the amount and the magnitude of traffic that the proposed project that's being evaluated. When we talk about a project that's generating 30% of the threshold of DOT even requiring a traffic study, it's very, very low in terms of traffic generation, which is why we're comfortable just looking at the intersection at the site driveway. Once that traffic exits that site driveway, it's going to start being distributed throughout the network. While you're going to have, trucks associated with the site are going to go down to Weston Canal and use 287. Employees, they may come from all sorts of different directions. They're not necessarily all going to be geared towards Weston Canal. So when you distribute that traffic to those area intersections, they become much less than that 30% threshold. Maybe it's 20% and then 10% and so forth. If this was a much larger project, maybe it was generating 200 trips or 300 trips, I think we would need to start taking that step and looking at Weston Canal and looking at those further, more regional intersections. But it's not appropriate for this project based on the size.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and it all depends, and that's also somewhat based on the size of the facility, on who your end user is and what their operations are like.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, was your question directed in part to the impact at this particular intersection
No,
or
I
other
just want to make sure
intersections
that,
generally?
that there's been at least an examination of how, even as small as you are, how you fit in with the big picture, because the big picture there is getting very big, much bigger every day.
Understood.
And, yes, it's your little piece of the action, but now we have about 20 or 20 different additions to that general area. And unfortunately, one of the major routes to 287 is Cottontail Lane, Canal Road, and those two intersections.
Yeah. And in that regard, though, I think, am I correct in understanding your testimony, Mr. Joppa, that, or Japola, my mistake, that while we're adding a little by way of additional traffic, there is a major improvement of that Weston Canal, Cottontail Lane intersection traffic light?
No, we're improving the traffic signal rate at our site driveway, which is Campus
Oh.
and Cottontail.
Campus and Cottontail, my mistake.
We're installing the fourth leg, but by installing that fourth leg, we're going to be making improvements to that intersection that are going to improve just traffic moving through the intersection. Again, for instance, traveling along Cottontail to make a left on Campus, you don't have a left turn arrow there. You'll have a left turn arrow, and it seems like a minor variation, but it adds organization to the traffic signal because you know you can go. You know you can make that left turn, and you can keep moving. You're not wondering if the opposing traffic is going to come through and you're going to impact them. That is why the MUTCD requires that left turn arrow, and that's why we would end up putting in as part of this project. So area-wide, this project really doesn't rise to the level of looking at, but for this little section, yeah, we're accommodating the fourth leg so this project can come in, but there's also going to be other incremental positive improvements with improvements to that signal.
And using that Campus road myself, I don't see that fourth leg helping. Right now, when I come down Campus to Cottontail, most of the time I can make a right turn because the traffic signals allow me to do. It's going to restrict me now because there's going to be opposing traffic coming towards Campus Lane on the other side of Cottontail.
You as the individual making the right turn, legally you would have the right of way, and that right turn arrow that you're used to today, that's still going to be there.
And also in late afternoon, Cottontail is really backed up with the truck traffic going towards Weston Canal Road, and unfortunately, when the trucks turn from Cottontail onto Weston Canal Road, a lot of times maybe one or two trucks can make the turn, but by time they do it and the light changes, so the backup lasts for a long time on Cottontail. I've experienced it myself. So.
Yeah. For instance, is the intersection that you're involved with going to be improved enough that trucks can make these turns and stay in their own lane?
Yes. So as part of, you heard the civil engineer testify, so as part of the site plan application, truck circulation diagrams were submitted, inclusive of a WB67. I also reviewed them. I was concerned myself with those at traffic signals. They are able to turn in and out of the driveways without crossing over stop bars. Sometimes you worry about that if does someone need to back up slightly and allow that truck to come out and make the left or the right. This is designed in a way that would not be necessary. So those truck turn movements can occur here.
So the intersection will be designed so that the trucks will fit it comfortably the way they should.
That's correct, yes.
I have a question. So you're proposing to build a 55,000 square foot warehouse here in this subdivided lot. So what is the size of the building that's already there in the original lot, just in comparison?
If I may, Ms. Bethia? Did I mispronounce it?
No.
Oh, Ms. Fidows. The agenda says 54,000. It's actually 51, just minor correction. We had to change that to meet some of the town criteria. But as to the existing building, it's I believe, and Ms. Giordano will correct me if I'm wrong, 79,713 square feet.
And I think you said something about you don't know who the tenant is, but it's probably going to be similar to the existing use. And so what is the existing use?
The existing use is an apparel business, 10 West Apparel, and they manufacture and distribute their own lines of product, correct? Have to look to my client, make sure I'm not misspeaking.
Okay, so that is just for distribution, not.
Correct.
Now, getting back to the traffic part, it's not part of your property, but in order to make the trucks turn faster, you really need to group the corner of Cottontail and Canal Road, Western Canal Road. That curving has to be more rounded, because the trucks, part of the problem is they have to go into the opposing lane when they make a right turn. And you're gonna just add more trucks to that burden. And that's a problem we have all over the town. With all the new warehouses, our roads and intersections aren't designed for trucks. Trucks take over the entire intersection in many cases to make a turn. And that's, unfortunately, that's not under your control because it's not your property. But that's a big problem we have in this town.
Yeah, understood. I think, you know, what I can say about this project and this intersection that we do have control of, we're aware of those types of things and we're designing to make sure it doesn't happen in the areas that we touch. Like you said, that's an existing issue that we don't have control over.
Okay, any other questions?
I have a question for you, sir. So can you tell us about the initial process when you were looking at this property and doing your studies? Did you look into some of the other neighboring properties or maybe the traffic studies that have been done and documented here in the township for Cottontail and review that as the part of like the initial review? Or was there just like this study was done and that was it pretty much?
Well, I mean, as a professional in New Jersey, we've prepared those studies throughout New Jersey. We've prepared some of those studies within Franklin Township. We found those adjacent developments and we obtained those 4 traffic studies that I mentioned and included them. Specifically as it relates in due diligence, no, typically you wouldn't do that in that stage. You would do it in the preparation of the study by obtaining the traffic studies for adjacent projects and including their background traffic.
And did you find anything that stood out as like different from what you were, your initial thoughts or initial ideas were going into this?
No, and one of the things that I really look at is I make sure to get out there, and I look at when we evaluate we take our traffic counts in the existing condition, and then we run our analysis, and I look at it just visually. Am I looking at it in the brush hours? Is it generally consistent? I add a lot more weight into that because every other traffic study is going to be a projection, much like mine is. So I really try to base it on those observations and looking at this site, comparing the volumes, looking at it out there, it's all very consistent.
Sure. And this study that you conducted, did it have this understanding of, the summer traffic nuances and then the spring or fall when the schools are closed and when the schools are open?
Yes, yeah. In this area especially, we would always look to perform our traffic study when schools are open. We have a very rigid policy on scheduling traffic counts where we check the individual school calendar to make sure there's no half-day closures, full-day closures, so that we're counting on appropriate days. That's very important to our process.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any others? Okay, next.
Okay, I think then we are going to call our planner, and this is Mr. Paul Greigel.
Hi, Paul. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And just repeat your name, spell your last name, please.
Yes, good evening. It's Paul Greigel, Grygiel.
Thank you.
Mr. Greigel, you're a licensed planner here in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I am. I have been since 1999. I can give additional qualifications if you like for the
If you
board's
would, please.
consideration. Yes, as I mentioned, I've been a licensed planner for 25 years. I also am a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. Currently, I'm a principal of a planning consulting firm, Phillips, Price, Greigel, Laney Hughes. We're based in Hoboken, but my practice takes me throughout the state and sometimes beyond. I've appeared regularly before boards throughout New Jersey. Over 150 of them have qualified me as an expert planner. Never here, but I have been in New Brunswick, North Brunswick, Piscataway, and a number of surrounding towns where I've been accepted.
I think we can move forward.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair. And Mr. Greigel, have you had an opportunity to review the local ordinance, the site, and this project?
Yes, I have.
And did you reach a conclusion based on same?
Yes, I have, and I provide testimony in support of the use variance, which in my opinion, I do believe can be granted, as well as the D2 variance for expansion of a non-conforming use, and the one limited bulk variance we have for the loading area dimensions. Before I start my testimony, I do have one exhibit. I think it might be easier to put it up now and
Okay, if
refer
you
to
would.
it. And I do have handouts of it as well, to make it easier.
A9, I believe.
Yes. A9.
And would you like me to assist with the handout?
That'd be terrific. Here. I guess before I start my testimony, I'll identify the exhibit. It's titled Aerial and Zoning Exhibit, 91 Cottontail Lane and Vicinity, Township of Franklin, New Jersey. It was prepared by my office under my direction. It's based upon Google Map aerials, and we have overlaid the location of the subject property shown roughly in the center, outlined in orange, and then the zoning districts of the subject property and surrounding area. And I guess we'll start with that just because we've heard testimony previously from other witnesses, and I don't want to rehash what Ms. Giordano described in terms of the surrounding area. The board is certainly familiar with it, but we are dealing with a property that is already partially developed, and the applicant, as we've heard, is seeking to subdivide off a portion of that, which was previously a separate lot, and to allow for development that would fill in the gap within the development context. Just to be clear, it's a privately owned property. This is not public open space or preserved land. So we do have a right to look to try to develop it within the parameters of your zoning ordinance, and we do need some variances as we recognize. But the area is characterized, in my opinion, as a planner and as shown on Exhibit A9, by a wide range of non-residential uses. And I point that out because I'll come back to that in a few minutes when I get to the meat of the testimony, that there are concerns about impacts on residential uses. We're in an area here with a number of commercial, office, industrial, warehouse-type uses in the immediate vicinity. A bit further afield, you do get into residential, but again, there's nothing nearby. You do also have some, again, older office buildings and hotels that have existed here for some time, but there has been a trend, as the board is well aware, of transitioning of some of those uses to other non-residential uses. There's also an exhibit of Mr. Healy's June 3rd, 2024 memo, which has a similar map. So I think we can agree on what the context is. It's just a matter of how I interpret it for the use variance request. So the applicant, as we've heard, is seeking to construct a warehouse building of around 51,000 square feet on the subject property, on the subdivided portion fronting on Cottontail. We've heard the description of the use generally. it is typical, in my opinion, as a planner, to have uses, to have a use category such as warehouse that's not defined. But again, over time, that would be addressed if it's proved, first of all, if the potential user comes in, to make sure that the property is appropriate for it. And actually, in this size building, it's generally self-selecting. You're not going to have a use that is going to not be able to be accommodated with the number of docks, with the amount of parking spaces, with the amount of traffic improvements that are being constructed. The property is in the BI Business and Industry Zone, which has a wide range of various commercial and other non-residential uses permitted. The board, I'm sure, is aware that in March of 2023, warehouses were removed as a permitted use in the BI district. The applicant did submit its application prior to that ordinance being adopted, but unfortunately for the applicant, it was not deemed complete. That's again why we are seeking this use variance. The D2 variance is being requested to expand what's now a non-conforming use on the somewhat recently constructed warehouse on the portion of the property fronting on Weston Canal Road. All that said, in the BI zone, we comply with all bulk standards, so coverage, height, setbacks, all those standards, as well as minimum parking and loading spaces are met. So it's really more the use that the board needs to consider whether you can grant the variances. Just one other variance was mentioned by Ms. Giordano was the depth of a loading area. It's required to be twice the length of the longest vehicle, so 147 feet is required. 130 feet is proposed. What I'll do now is turn first to the proofs for the use variance and offer them for your consideration. As a Board of Adjustment, you're probably well aware of these, so I won't repeat the criteria, but essentially we have to demonstrate first the positive criteria that a site is, in this case, particularly suitable to accommodate the proposed use, and also need to address the negative criteria. There's no substantial detriment to the public good or to the master plan or zoning ordinance. In this case, I do believe the positive criteria is addressed due to the size of the property and the proposed warehouse being rather minimal compared to other uses of this type, as well as the setting and location. So we'll start with the setting. The property is in a non-residential section of the township. As you can see on Exhibit A9, the context is essentially all other types of non-residential uses, many larger in scale. The abutting properties to the north, south, and west are developed with warehouses or similar type uses, as well as many of the properties in the surrounding area. I understand the concerns that the board and the township and residents and others may have about warehouse development in areas where you're closer to residential, but this particular property actually has no such issues. Secondly, with regard to the location, the property has frontage on and access from a road that serves similar uses. I know we've heard concerns about the traffic from those, but the reality is there's existing conditions there today. And that's because you can access an interstate highway interchange a short distance from here without traversing through residential areas. So any concerns about the limited truck traffic that will be generated can be mitigated by the fact, again, it's a direct shot right over to Route 287. If I was being asked to justify a variance of this type elsewhere in the township that was closer to residential or farther away from Route 287, I don't think I'd have the same opinion or be here before you. The road network actually also is adequate to handle employee trips, and we actually even have bus stops in front of the site. So there's the ability for public transit for the users of the facility. Again, the employees who'd be coming and going. Lastly, in terms of the size, again, this is, what's the opposite of a mega warehouse? I wouldn't call it a micro warehouse, but again, we're not talking 200, 400 million square feet here. It's just over 50,000 square feet that's proposed with 9 loading docks. So this is very modest in terms of the standards of what is being seen in the business today and being seen throughout New Jersey. It's certainly not a large-scale warehouse that would have the types of impacts that, that are being the concern of many people who live nearby such facilities. So I think for those reasons, the positive criteria can be met, that the site is suitable. Just the last part of that is, again, just looking at what's out there, this is literally kind of the last piece of property that's available along Cottontail and Campus Drive in the vicinity. It's undeveloped today. It's not going to be left undeveloped. You could put other uses there potentially, but it's something that, I think we as an appropriate user or use to fill in this last piece of property along this stretch of roadway. So I think for those reasons, we are providing for the health, safety, and general welfare, purpose A, by providing for a development that is similar with the existing character of the surrounding area. It's a modest use that can fit on the property due to its location, its size, and the other factors I cited. Likewise, I believe purpose G of the land use law is met, that it's an appropriate location for this type of use. Before the warehouse zoning amendment was made, the township allowed such uses, and the area is developed with them. So I still think, despite the change in the ordinance, this area is appropriate as a setting for this modestly scaled warehouse. And lastly, purpose J of the municipal land use law, promoting the conservation of historic sites and district, open space, and other areas. I paraphrase a bit, but essentially by providing for development where you already have infrastructure in place, road network, utilities, and a development can be accommodated here in a built-up area versus in a more greenfield type of site. With regard to the negative criteria, first, I don't think they make substantial detriment to the public good. The new lot that we're proposing with the warehouse, again, not to rehash, but it's essentially surrounded by similar types of uses. I think it's reasonable to assume this property is not going to sit vacant forever. It is, again, privately owned. We have a use that is viable and realistic. It's similar to the use on the other part of the property. It would not have a substantial negative impacts compared to a larger scale warehouse. It also, we can accommodate and in fact upgrade the intersection directly adjacent to the subject property. That is a benefit to the surrounding area to modernize or upgrade that intersection and the traffic signal serving it. In terms of the area of disturbance on the site, it's not the use itself driving it. If you were to put an office building, you know, again, if there even was a market for it, or a hotel, or other type of use on this property, a cannabis facility, you'd still need to develop parking areas, you'd still need to develop a building, so it's not that this use is going to have any impacts that are beyond what you would have for any type of other permitted use. So I think that, again, we're dealing with no substantial detriment compared to development as of right on the property. We're also, in fact, addressing all environmental concerns. We've addressed the plan to lower the size of the building somewhat, to adjust certain things with regard to parking and circulation to make this site work as well as it can in its setting. Lastly, I think it's important to note we do comply with all the BI zone bulk standards. So it's not going to be a taller building than is permitted. It's not going to be larger. It's not going to essentially have any type of overdevelopment compared to what could be built otherwise on the property. In terms of potential impacts on the zone plan and zoning ordinance, I recognize, again, as a planner, that the township has had a master plan update and zoning amendments that have changed the permitted uses in this area. The zoning was amended just, again, in the last couple of years. But looking back before that, it's interesting that the township did think that this property was appropriate for warehouse use. And other than development happening elsewhere, nothing has changed in the immediate vicinity of this property. Again, looking at its sort of very localized context, that would make it less appropriate. You're still close to 287. You're still on roads that have similar types of uses. I would even note that the township's own strategic zoning and economic development recommendations plan from 2020 recommended consolidating the M1, M2, and CB zones into one BI zone. This site was actually formerly in the M1 zone, which permitted warehouses and similar uses, unlike the former CB zones. You had multiple zones put together, and I think in trying to address a concern, that's a valid one potentially elsewhere in the township, there's a kind of a broad brush that painted this area to be, in the same way, that even though the factors here are much different, we're farther from residential, we're closer to the highway, we still are a non-permitted use, unfortunately. So I think, again, there's some factors in this report, as well as the master plan update dealing with warehouse development that can be considered. So there's some rationale cited. The BI zone specifically mentions access to Route 287, and also to avoid nuisances upon adjacent residential uses. I note with regard to residential, the closest one to this property is about 1,200 feet away to the east. Looking on A9, I believe you can see some of the houses that are farther away. They're actually non-conforming uses within the BI zone. The nearest residential zone is actually 1/3 to 1/2 mile away to the northeast on the opposite side of 287. So you're literally, to get to residential zones, you need to go across acres and acres of land that's developed with warehouses and light industrial, and many thousands and upon millions of square feet of warehouses and other types of industrial non-residential uses. We are well separated from any residential uses that could be directly impacted. On the flip side, again, the driving distance to Route 287 is, we're talking 1,600 feet roughly, linear feet, to get to this 287 south ramp, and an extra 600 or so feet to get to 287 north. So you're about as close as you can get to the highway. So I think we're really mitigating any concerns that you have with regard to warehouses, compared to, again, other areas that are differently situated. The master plan does indicate that property owners still have the ability to request a variance as we are in the BI zone, and we need to address the proofs, including suitability. Again, in my opinion as a planner, I think there are a number of reasons that warrant considering this one particular site and its particular suitability for a warehouse use. Just lastly, I want to touch on the D2 variance for the expansion of the non-conforming use. That's the existing warehouse next door. We're not introducing anything different. Nothing is changing on that property fronting on Weston Canal Road. The context there is well established where it's located. The circulation won't change. Access won't change. Nothing else is going to be done to make that property different other than this rear portion of an irregularly shaped lot being cut off and to actually be developed in a way that would be consistent where it's located. But again, looking at A9, you know, it's essentially the shapes of the lots are two that were melded together previously, so we're just going back to a condition that existed in the past. So I don't think that there's any issues with regard to the positive criteria being met for the expansion of the non-conforming use. With regard to the potential negative impacts from that D2 variance, they're roughly the same as everything I've mentioned already on the suitability of this site and the surrounding area. But again, the public good, there's no changes to what's out there today. Taking away a piece of property that is actually fronting on a different roadway, that's separated by a brook and environmentally sensitive areas, it is not going to have any substantial negative impacts on the public good. And likewise on the master plan or zoning ordinance. We are just, again, due to a zoning change, we have an issue here that wouldn't have been the case if we had filed our application a bit sooner or been deemed complete a bit sooner. So I think that it's a technical expansion of the use. It's really not a physical expansion of that property. And lastly, we have 1C variance with regard to the loading area. Again, Ms. Giordano touched on that, and I think I can defer to her. That it's a standard to have a 130-foot deep loading area for that type of use. We're not looking to provide excess pavement for the sake of it. We think we have a safe and appropriate layout of the property to accommodate trucks in the rear of the site. So I think that variance can be granted under the C2 criteria, the benefits of allowing truck loading to occur safely and efficiently without additional pavement or improvements being put in place outweighing the detriments, and there's really no substantial detriment from having a slightly shallower loading area than is required by ordinance. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions first from council, or if the board would like to ask questions. Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify for a moment about the intensification of the existing use, and you touched upon it, but essentially the only intensification is that the lot is now smaller. It's not that there's actually a larger or more intense activity.
That's correct. Maybe I glossed over that. It's stated at the outset, this was a larger lot. We had to mitigate for off-site. We are doing it in a different manner now. But nothing changes about the layout of that structure, the layout of the circulation patterns, access, anything else.
And in terms of the separation of that undeveloped portion, it's actually separated by the brook, which means that the two properties could not have been used in conjunction with one another because you've got a wetlands and a stream. Correct?
Yes, we have an existing condition that precludes the ability to have a unified access or development. Even if it would make more sense, it just is really, without violating environmental concerns or ordinances, you could not do that.
Okay, thank you. That was all I had.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, before we ask questions, I'm just going to ask another follow-up question on or provide some clarification on the D2, because we don't get a lot of D2 variances before the board. So as it's been explained, a D2 variance is for an expansion of a non-conforming use. So that's one of the variances that can only, the D variances that can only go before the zoning board. So the existing warehouse that's on Weston Canal Road is now a pre-existing non-conforming use. If you want to take a use that's pre-existing, non-conforming, and expand it, just kind of like a use variance, you have to go before the board. The reason why that D2 is before you is when you have a non-conforming use and you're going to make the lot smaller, that's technically deemed to be a D2 variance. So what they're doing here is, Mr. Grago, could you point to, just so the board understands, where the existing warehouse is that fronts on Weston Canal? So that's the existing warehouse, and the one thing that they're proposing to do, in addition to the site plan, again, is to subdivide that property, and they're gonna create that new lot that fronts on campus, and that's where the new warehouse is gonna go. So right now, that 79,000 square foot warehouse exists on a, property that, again, is on Weston Canal, then there's the area that they're gonna build the new one, that's a certain amount of acreage, they're gonna subdivide it, and now that 79,000 square foot warehouse is gonna exist on a smaller lot. So that's what the D2 is.
Would it be helpful to show A1, sorry, Mr. Healy, just to give the shape of the overall property today? So, again, this is oriented differently, but right, the warehouse Mr. Healy referred to over here, the property is irregular because it was essentially melded together for a specific reason.
And then can you point to where the property line is going to go on that, roughly?
It's not marked on here, but again, roughly by the brook.
Yeah, so then you can basically see again, it's a certain size. Now that lot that houses the 79,000 square foot warehouse is going to be smaller, so that's technically a D2 variance. And Mr. Grego provided testimony about it, but, so one question on that. So the lot that's being created for the existing 79,000 square foot, are there any variances associated with that, or does that lot fully comply and the building comply in terms of coverages and FAR and all of that?
I believe that testimony was from Ms. Giordano, that it does fully comply. If you want her to verify that, we can.
Okay. So that, again, I just wanted to clarify that, because again, I'm not sure we've had a D2 variance in 15 years, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mark. I guess the part I'm still not very clear on is, so at some point, the two lots were melded together because of some requirement which no longer exists. I guess that's, or you're doing something
The
off-site
requirement
that-
would still exist, and I can give the background on that again because I was involved. We went in front of the planning board, not this board. I misspoke beginning. When we were going in for the original building, the 79,000 building that's been constructed, we needed to move some wetlands and get approval from the DRCC. Actually, it was stream encroachment, not wetlands. Get a stream encroachment permit. They said, you can do that, but only if you give us a new conservation easement somewhere else. You can do it off-site, where for every 100 feet that you're taking away, you give us 200 off-site. Or you can do it on-site, and I forget what the ratio is, but it's smaller. Jackie can fill me in, but we couldn't find an off-site that complied because there are rules about where it can be, how far away from the zone. We could not locate a property, so we had to do it on-site. We've got two separate lots. We said, hey, we'll put it on the other lot next door, the 5-acre lot. They said, you can't do that. You must combine the lots, because even though you own both lots, because it's not on the same lot, we treat that as a separate lot, you have to give us the higher ratio. So we combined the lots to meet their requirements. Now we have located someplace off-site that we can meet the higher requirements. We would like to move that DRCC requirement there. They're okay with it, but it means coming back to the board and saying, you know those two lots we band-aided together? We'd like to take them apart again. And that's what we're here doing.
Okay, thank you. That explains it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
If the board doesn't have questions, I'll just have two more. So the particular suitability, you had mentioned the access to the proximity to 287. And the fact that you can access this site either to or from the site from 287 without going through a residential area. I believe you touched on this, but could you address whether that affects your opinion on the particular suitability of the property?
Yes, thank you. I'd be glad to try to elaborate on that point. I may have gone through it rather quickly. there are concerns raised throughout the township's planning documents about trucks and other traffic passing through residential areas that are adjacent to industrial and non-residential zones. And that was a concern that's specifically cited. So when I look at this property and show on Exhibit A9, yes, certainly. Thank you. Certainly, I suppose you could take well, cars definitely, but even trucks, if you really want, you go right out of the property or straight. The reality is if you're trying to get to the interstate road network or other state highways, you have the ability within, again, 1,200 feet by driving out down Cottontail. Yes, the intersection has some issues today, but it exists, and you're not passing any residential to get onto 287 south or go an extra 600 feet to get onto 287 north. There's no residential that would be impacted by that additional traffic. It's limited traffic, but still there's no residential uses that are there.
Okay, and then my second question is similar, and then I'm going to ask you to kind of summarize your testimony, because I think you did address it, but just if you could summarize. So the negative criteria, there's basically two prongs of the negative criteria. One is the impact to the public good, and a lot of times, you addressed a lot of the things you just talked about, the nature of the surrounding area, the consistency of this with that particular area, the distance from residential, et cetera. So in my opinion, that's addressing the public good. Mm-hmm. The second prong is addressing no substantial detriment to the zone plan and the master plan. And you did speak to it, but the fact remains that the town made the decision to change the ordinance to specifically prohibit this use.
Yes.
So how would grant of this variance not be a substantial detriment to that intent?
It's a very good question, and that's what the board needs to grapple with if they're going to consider approving the application. I did cite that the basis in the planning documents of the township raised some specific concerns. So even though they tie into the public good, the truck traffic and the impact on residential, they're actually master plan issues as well. And there's language in the amendments that say, an applicant still has the ability in this BI zone to come in and prove suitability. So I think in this case, the master plan and zoning provide an out by saying, okay, in this specific case, we have one very, limited in size lot that is surrounded by other similar uses. So that suitability and the proximity to the highway without residential uses being nearby, is not going to cause concerns that are those being most addressed by the master plan and zoning updates. I understand, the other thing I guess I would add with that, though, is that there are other uses permitted, but you'd have similar sized buildings or impacts anyway, whether it's self-storage, offices, data centers, cannabis uses, would still require the site to be developed, but the impacts in terms of traffic would be similar, or we may even have less in this case. The impacts in terms of any kind of tree removal or other development would be similar. I just don't think that a 51,000 square foot warehouse is what was being targeted by that change in zoning. It's you may disagree, the board may disagree. It's my opinion as a planner that we're dealing with a different type of scale of use, different type of setting than what was the intention of that ordinance change.
May I ask a follow-up to that, Mark?
Of course.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing you say incorrectly is, given the particular area of this part of the BI zone, where it's almost entirely built out around this property with other warehouses, that this is such a small warehouse use, and its proximity to the roadways makes it consistent with the grant of the approval, as opposed to the other parts of the BI zone, which are differently situated and may have had more of those concerns because of the proximity to residential, distance from the roadways, need to go through residential and the like.
I hate to hammer on the same points, but yes, that's maybe a cleaner way of putting it, that this is not we're really focused on a very specific area here. Again, if I was asked to justify a variance of this type elsewhere in the zone on a lot that was 5 times the size of it, or even twice the size, it'd probably be a different answer. But given the context that it's the last piece of property that's essentially developable right there, that is within this setting, I think it makes sense to consider going back to what was permitted previously, just in this one instance. I don't think there's any precedent, just because it's a very unique situation.
And I think, as you mentioned, the fact that it's a 50,000 square foot warehouse as opposed to a 250, 1 million square foot makes a substantial difference.
Yes, and that was, Mr. Healy had questions about that too. Again, we don't know the end user, but again, in my experience, would say that we're not looking at something that's a 24/7 operation with, the trucks coming and going, this box trucks versus, long-term storage of materials, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of the board?
Well, I'm not sure when this is I think the first application that we've had since the ordinance was passed where any other applications for warehouses have been grandfathered, I believe.
Yes,
And I
my
think,
recollection, this is the first warehouse before this board
Well,
since that ordinance.
I think you opened the door for the first time application like this, that for a little bit of a discussion that you've had that we need to have. I wasn't aware when the council passed the ordinance, they were concerned about the size of the buildings. They were concerned about the numbers of trucks, pure and simple. And also, it's kind of been not accurate. It's not that warehouses are non-conform or non-permitted uses in BI zones. They're not permitted uses, period, which is a little different. And I was looking for a little bit of a compelling argument with some strong support as to why we should be going against the express wishes of the council. And again, it's not the size of the warehouse. I think you, in my mind, you've gone a long way to giving me some things, let's say, that I might be able to hang my hat on in support of this. But that's why I was talking about with a traffic expert. Your place, as small as you are in the big picture, no matter what happens, you're adding to the big picture. And the council has decided that they don't want this use, period, in this town. And I think that when that decision was made, we have to have really strong reasons. Maybe, I don't know, our attorney can tell me that I'm wrong. I would think we need a little, maybe we can't legally do this, but even a little more compelling reason to grant a use variance than we would normally, where the use is permitted somewhere else, but you're looking for a suitable place in a zone that it's not permitted. I think, without getting ahead of myself, I don't know that, honestly, that you can find a more suitable site for a warehouse. And I think you have gone a long way with the idea that there doesn't need to be any truck traffic through any residential area in order for this place to function, which might make it more palatable in the circumstances that they're actually banned everywhere and they went out of their way to do it. So legally or not, I think that since this is our first application, everybody on the board should think about whether a compelling enough argument has been made to do that, to grant an approval. Because this is a use that was taken away, and specifically taken away. So if we approve it, in a sense, you could say we are impacting the master plan.
May I address some of those concerns, Mr. Chair, based on some of the testimony that I think I and the board heard, but addressing particularly some of the comments that you just made?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. First, I think we probably are the first application asking for a variance after that change by the council. And one of the reasons, as was alluded to by Mr. Greigel, is we had actually filed before the change, but unfortunately were not deemed complete until after the change went into effect. So unlike those who were grandfathered, we missed by a little, which makes it likely that we would be first because we'd filed before it went into effect. As to the intent of banning, and you talked about, size not necessarily being as important as trucks, as our traffic expert addressed, and Mr. Weigel addressed, the size of the building does impact directly on the trucks because it's a smaller use. 9 loading docks as opposed to 100 loading docks because it's a 50,000 square foot building located so close to the highways. You're going to get minimal truck traffic. And when you look at the permitted uses, as Mr. Weigel also referenced, it's not necessarily different from truck uses that would be for other permitted uses. Self-storage, cannabis, I don't know what the other facility. Mr. Weigel was going to add light manufacturing. You could have a light manufacturing use, which is essentially what the existing building does, light manufacturing with a self-associated distribution. You get the exact same number of truck traffic, of trucks generated. I am not in the council's mind, but I think looking at what they did, it is like, and the concern about the trucks, they were concerned about the larger warehouses and perhaps, as Mr. Weigel suggested, painted with a broader brush. In terms of how can we go against the wishes, as Mr. Weigel also pointed out, there is the exception that allows the board to grant variances, including use variances, depending on the peculiarity of the circumstances. I agree 100% with what you said, Mr. Chair. You have to consider the proofs in front of you. And I suggest that the proofs that have been presented through the testimony, the size of the warehouse, which is quite modest as warehouses go, the location and proximity to the roadways, the nature of every other existing use there in this location, all argue strongly in favor of granting the use variance because you're not going to see another situation, another property presented that's anywhere close to this. If we were coming in, as Mr. Weigel had said, with a 250,000 square foot warehouse, it'd be a different situation. 50,000 square foot warehouses, very small, not many, and it is consistent with light manufacturing and other uses, which may well end up being there. So,
I understand. I brought this up. This is an intelligent board, but just as a reminder that the circumstances are a little different in that this use is totally banned, and vote however you feel the facts lead you, but be comfortable that you're satisfied with the proofs one way or the other. This is just, a month from now or a year from now, we hear more of these things. This is probably not going to be, I'm hoping it wouldn't be a concern, but, normally for a warehouse, this place is packed, and it's not tonight, and I'm sort of wondering why. But
I think it's part of what the testimony you heard. People who are warehouses next door aren't concerned, unlike some of the areas I think the town fathers were concerned about. But I take everything you said about needing to consider carefully what you've heard, the nature of the application, the nature of the property into consideration, is all accurate. You have to vote your conscience. You have to do what you think is right. But I do think we've made a compelling case.
okay, any other questions?
Do you consider this a hardship issue, the variance?
I did not cite that as hardship as a basis for it. That is, certainly one for C1 or bulk variance, and in relatively extreme circumstances, you could do that for use variance too. We recognize other uses are permitted, so it's not that this is the only possible use of the property. So I'm relying more on the suitability versus the hardship.
Anything else? I would think that That concludes your testimony.
That concludes our testimony unless the board had other questions.
Okay, then we'll make a quick open to the public, if there is any public who want to make any comments or ask any questions. Doesn't look like there are. We'll close. Any board questions for anybody? Anything you want to say? Summarize.
Well, I think in response to your questions, I probably gave what was essentially the closing argument. I do think the testimony you've heard has made a compelling case for this particular property in this particular property in this particular instance. The size of the use, the nature of the property, its location to the major roadways, the surrounding properties, and the fact that as a 50,000 square foot building, it's not going to generate more truck traffic than the other permitted uses in the BI zone. Most likely, there's no guarantees, but most likely and reasonably, it's not. If this were light manufacturing, which it may be the exact same. Cannabis uses are permitted, that I have my own opinions about. Self-storage, you'd have similar traffic, if not necessarily the same truck traffic. We don't know at this moment exactly the nature of the use, but we know that being a 50,000 square foot warehouse, I would suggest you haven't seen an application for a 50,000 square foot warehouse probably in the past year, year and a half, and you probably won't see one in the next 10 years. But that's me.
Probably true. Any other comments, questions, motion?
Okay, I make a motion, we approve Somerset Properties ZBA -23-00016. They already agreed twice to the staff comments, and I don't know if we have any other conditions that we need to.
They need to, they need to get a modification for DEP permits, so that was mentioned by their engineer.
Yes, we would get all other outside approvals that were required, including the DEP permits, and we have to get a sign-off by the DRCC.
I second the motion.
Before, just one second, another question. Do we have to formally get a commitment concerning the intersection, or is that part of the?
I believe that's in the staff reports, and in compliance with the staff reports is what they've agreed to, one of the conditions
Yes.
they've agreed to.
Okay.
I believe that's correct.
One condition the board may want to consider is, again, the type of warehouse. I mean, you've heard, good amount of testimony about what type of warehouse this is going to be, how it's been designed to be a certain type of warehouse, not cross-docked, not designed to accommodate the box trucks and smaller trucks to be, I was reading the state report, and there is such a thing as a smaller fulfillment center for more local deliveries. That's not the proposal that they're putting forward. It's not designed for that, so I can't imagine the applicant would be opposed to a condition that it's not going to be a small-scale fulfillment center. It's going to be long-term storage for,
We agree.
storage use.
It is a real use as opposed to a fulfillment center. I don't know how else to characterize that. It is not going to be a fulfillment center.
Okay. So I think, if the board was inclined to approve it, that there should be clear language in the resolution explaining what the applicant testified to, what their use is.
And we would be okay with a condition that it is not going to be used as a fulfillment center.
Thank you.
Okay, then we can,
I second and accept the explanation.
you're amending your motion for that?
Yes, so we'll add that in as a
All right,
motion.
and Joel seconded it.
Okay. Joel Reese,
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal,
There's no question that this is a difficult decision for us because of all the recent warehousing situations and the meetings that we have or we're gonna have and everything else. But I think that you have met your obligation with the understanding that, as Mark just indicated, it's important that you continue to concentrate on the type of warehouse which has been indicated. So I'm gonna vote yes.
Vaseem Firdas?
Yeah, I agree, it's a difficult decision, because it's the first time, to go sort of against what, the ordinance that was just passed, but that is kind of what the board does. And I think there's been a compelling case made that it's better, and with all the, with all the conditions. So I'm gonna vote yes.
Alan Rich?
Yeah, I don't want to set a precedence here either. I think this is a one-time thing. Hopefully we won't have to deal with something like this again. So I'm going to vote for it.
Let's see. Kanal Lakia? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Faraz Khan?
I'm gonna vote yes, and if I've seen more people here, or anybody from the public, or the case that has been made about, residential avoiding that area, maybe I would have looked at it differently, but I'm going to vote yes.
Okay, Michael Dougherty?
I am going to vote no. I do not think that there was a compelling enough argument that clearly should disavow the clear intent of the council and the ordinance.
Okay, did I call on you, Alan?
Yes.
You did. Okay, and you were a yes vote?
Yes.
Okay. And Chairman Thomas?
I'm going to vote yes. I think I might have sounded a little bit hostile, and I probably am in terms of warehouses, but I agree with a couple of the comments made previously, but also, I'll just repeat, I don't know, and I don't remember where there's been a more appropriate site. I think that's maybe the most compelling thing for me. It fits where it is, where it is fits. It's surrounded by the uses. Anyway, there's no sense beating a dead horse. Good luck with it. Yes.
And I've called on everybody. It's not usually my thing. So I have the 6-1 in favor of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
You're welcome, and we'll entertain a motion to close.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Close. Meeting adjourned.